Hey kids, welcome to the Stylus Harmony animation rigging and tutorial guide thing. Today's episode we're going back to our animation. Last episode we did all these keys and I've gone to the bother of tidying them up a little bit. So these hands are just a little bit closer to what they should be. Got some alternative phone drawings just so that it's starting to fill in a little bit. Blip, 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 blip. So here's what we have so far. He looks over. See something, doesn't like it, and he leaves off screen. There's any number of ways we can get from here to the next step. You can just start at the beginning and start adding stuff in, or you can just start filling in the next biggest movements and work your way down from the biggest to the smallest. That's the way I like to work, because the biggest stuff is going to be the most difficult. And if I need to change something, I don't want to spend a big pile of time doing nitpicky stuff like thumb twiddling and then end up having to completely change a major key because it's not quite working and you've just wasted all the time on the little bitty stuff. So I like to work big to small as much as possible. So first thing I'm going to do is look at the overall movement that I have and see what kind of natural arcs are standing out to me and whether I can improve them at all. So let me just draw my thought process here. This sort of stuff, I usually just think it rather than actually going and drawing all this stuff. But I'm going to watch this wrist here in particular because he's got quite a bit of stuff to do. So here so far, he's coming down. Boop. Boop. And then here he's coming down and around like this. So there's not a huge amount of flow in that at this point. I think rather than what we have, it'd be nicer if our curve looked a little bit more like this, maybe. So I could bring this wrist down a little bit more than I have and then have it come up and around with a little bit more flow. And this is the type of thing I'm going to look through every type of the part of the body for and see where I can get some more rhythm and what's really going to lend itself to the action as well. So this is where you have to start thinking about the acting stuff and the thought process. So here's head lingers, which I like, and then it comes from here to here. I'm trying to think in my head. So here's his eyes here. They're not moving very much. And then they're moving up, so I don't think that's necessary. These up and these over. So now we're getting a little bit of movement. But I think I want more, again, so I want to bring this down even more. Maybe not that much, but as he's coming around, I'm going to go to my translate pegs. I'm keeping that separate. So I'm going to bring him over a little bit more because this is quite a decent chunk of time. Between 49 and 61, that's 12 frames, so that's half a second. And he's not, even his legs aren't getting very far in that time. So I'm going to bring him over a little bit more and have him drag more in the upper body. So I still want that drag to be pretty significant. So I'm not opposed to the half-second drag as much as I am to the whole thing's not really getting anywhere in that time frame. And there, see his head is coming up quite a bit quickly. So this is because he's like turning to the front and he's not retaining that slouch. So here his body's straightened up quite a bit. This one, he's got quite a bit of body curve, so his head is coming down. You can see right down almost to his shirt collar, his neck. And then in the next frame, when he started to come around, look how much higher his neck and head have come. So I think his head should drag not only in the direction here, but also in coming up. So I'm going to bring that head right down there, not be... Whoop. I'm also going to tilt it a little bit. All right, that's like a little bit nicer flow. So here if we erase this, he's looking over, and then his eyes are starting to come up and across, and then down again. So we're getting a little bit more flow out of those eyes. And this is a really good place for hair follow through. So this part's going to be quite long, getting from here to here. And then between this part where it starts to come around and here, that's much quicker. I might need to pull it back just a touch, maybe a frame or two. But this part's going to be quite long, and then it's going to go whoosh, and he's going to run off screen. So we're just varying up our timing, giving ourselves contrast. Contrast is, it's such a little word for such a huge thing. Contrast is so important. So you want to get contrast in your pose. So rather than having your character completely straight on like this, so your arms are identical, and then your head is identical, and your eyes, like everything is straight down, by even just turning him 3/4, you're literally getting a contrast. This side's small and this side's big. You want to get contrast in, you know, from crunched up to straight. Contrast here in poses. And then you want contrast in timing. So here he's going slow, and here he's going fast. Contrast is just such an important thing that can go through absolutely every part of your animation. From your design, which I'm not a super good designer, so my character is not super contrasty. He's just a long, lanky guy with a big head. But good design, when you look at character designers, their stuff has great contrasts. You're gonna have to look elsewhere for high quality character design. Yep. 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 And here, when the arm crosses the body, at some point it's going to have to go from here to here. So I think this, it's probably here at this frame before it gets to this one. It's still going to be coming around. So this one might actually need to be a little bit later, this actual hand. We'll see how that works, because this hand is going to come around a little bit slower than the rest of him. I'm also looking at this elbow while I'm doing this, making sure that my elbow is having just a nice arc of its own. That doesn't look too bad. Here it might feel a little bit stuck, but so we may have to sweep that hand over a little bit quicker. We're gonna have to redraw some stuff here, but that sort of stuff, like tidying this up so it looks super crisp, that can be left until the very end, because we're probably going to change the timing quite a bit in the interim. So I'm just going to do like a decent enough arm for there and worry about it, the cleanup last. So here's shoulders coming down. I think this shoulder should linger down a little bit more as well. And now I'm looking at his shirt collar and his chin, just making sure this part is all coming around in a nice arc that I want. And I feel like that's already working a little better than it was. So this part, I feel like the movement's not as big. This movement over here is pretty big, so we can already start to see these arcs within the keys themselves. And I've got quite a few keys in this area. So that part's starting to work. This part, I feel like, because it's a smaller movement, it actually means more drawings to start to evolve that rhythm and stuff, if that makes sense. Bigger movements are easier in a way. Like the actual posing and anatomy and stuff like that can get more difficult because you're dealing with foreshortening and stuff like that. But these subtle movements, you need a lot more information before you can see if it's working right. And when the acting is subtle or things are happening that are very small, if they're not big enough, then they don't exist. And if they're too big, then you're kind of overselling it. So smaller stuff can actually be a little bit more tricky because you have to use your brain and get things working. Like one little thing, when he looks up here, would his eyes go first or would his head go first? Because when we were looking at the Tangled episode, he heard something and his eyes went first and then his head went next. But in this case, if he's leaning on the platform and he's waiting for the subway, and he's looking at his phone, and he wants to just say, look up and see if the subway's coming, or see if the train is coming. So would he look up first and then bring his head? Or would he lift his head, but his eyes would linger on his phone because he's an addict to technology, and he wants to maintain eye contact with his little technology as long as he can, and then look up? And that feels more correct to me. People are a little bit too obsessed with their phone. All right, so we can auto tween. Let's just make sure we've got our keyframe set on these two. on our master, because we have added deformers and stuff in the middle, so we want to make sure that we've got our key down through all the bits if we're going to use our auto tween system. And then we're not just going to key here, because that's one of the things that can get you looking really mechanical, is if you actually use the auto tween in its mechanical fashion. And you'll see a lot of beginner animation where this is the stage they'll get to. They're like, oh sweet, I've got my keys, so I'm gonna just go F6. So they just beep. So they'll just auto tween the whole way across, and you'll get this. So from one to the next, one to the next, one to the next, one to the next. And they'll tidy up the in-betweens. Or they might favor something, like they'll say slow in and slow out of these things. But this so far is just super mechanical. Things are happening 1 thing, 2 things, 3 things, 4 things, 5 things. And this is not uncommon to see for junior animators. And of course the hair and stuff would be tidied up, some of these like flips and stuff. That's just where drawing substitutions have come along. But you'll just get this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 thing happening where it goes from move to move to move to move. Ooh. And you get some of these like sloppy looking drunk eyes. So it's not as simple as just auto tweening between everything and then just, mopping up. What I'm going to do instead is think about each piece and where I want each piece to do a thing. So here, for example, the head, let's start there. So for the first 6 or 8 frames, let's move it over to 7. I'm going to just have the head stay and then have the head come up. And I do want the head to sort of drift up. I don't want it to just be a quick movement. I want him to kind of like start looking up because he's like, oh, I wonder if the train's coming. But I want his eyes to stay down. So the eyes we can work on last. But what I'm going to do, let's say we want to slow out here. See how that looks. All right. And the features, I don't want them to just follow along mindlessly. I do have a features peg, which is super convenient for doing perspective-y stuff. But it's also good here if we want to drag our keyframes back. These glasses to come out a bit. So let's tidy that up. And I want these eyelids to happen later. So the head comes up and then the eyelids come later. So I'm just going to drag the eyelid keys over 4 frames and see how that looks. Head's coming up. The eyelids are starting to come up. And the pupils we want to happen last. Pupils don't drift. If you watch some headshots of actors talking, eyes are really darty. Like, unless you're watching something that's kind of slow moving and very steady, your eyes tend to dart around a lot more. So if I'm turning my head from here to here, my eyes don't drift the whole way along unless I have something like here, like my finger, to actually hold the attention of my eyes, because that would make you dizzy. So your brain, like, you'll move and you'll kind of fix on pieces as you go along. When eyes drift, they look drifty. If that makes sense. You start to look a little bit vacant and like your character's not alive. So I'm even putting stop motion on here. I'm planning on doing this on 2, so none of these long tweens are going to be retained. But even just for looking at my my basics here, I'm going to take out that tween because eyes they don't look good tweened. And if you really have darty eyes, you can put an in-between like this, where you actually squash your eye down. If you want super darty eyes like that, you can see that it looks like I might throw some of those in here when he's looking around for an escape route. Throw in some darty eyes and it looks really frantic just by adding that little swooshy. And it's almost invisible, but almost invisible is what brings you up to the next tier of animation, getting in those little pieces. And we could even add a blink in here. I think this is a good place for a blink. Head turns are a great place for a blink because, again, your eyes don't like to drift along long pans like that. They like to dart or like pick pieces. So throwing in a blink like this is going to eliminate that problem of trying to get the eyes looking good. So let's toss a blink in here. Because these are slidey eyelids, you have to throw in keys, which is the downside to them. So let's bring them down. And I'm gonna throw some deformers on here. I want to get these eye lines. I don't want my eye lines to disappear, and I also don't want to draw in eye lines. And because I've just thrown these deformers on, what I'm going to do is actually put a keyframe, boop, boop, and make sure that there's keyframes in between here. So I do like drawing substitution eyes more than I like these guys. These are just much faster to set up than to do a pile of drawing substitutions. So please forgive me for giving you the lazy option on this rig if you're using it. Another alternative to throwing in these deformers would be to add an overlay on your eyelids or a drawing substitution. So there's lots of different ways to get these blinks looking good. Alright, so I throw a little blink in there. And the eyebrows as well. You don't want to ignore eyebrows. They're so underrated. So here they're already sliding up, but I don't want that to happen so soon. Here the eyelids are starting to go down. So I'm going to bring those keyframes in. I'm actually going to drag this key over and drag this key over so it's not moving. I'm actually going to bring them down when the eyelids go down. So here the eyelids are going down. And here the eyelids are going to happen a little bit later than the rest of the face. So I've just pulled these keys back. And they're moving way too far, I think. So what I'm going to do is between here and here, like you've got, hello, they're going too far. So what I'm going to do is go about halfway and put keyframes there and then just drag them over. So instead of trying to eyeball exactly where these should be on here, I'm just going to take a place that I already have and grab those there. This we can also add a little bit of a drag on. So this is going pretty quick. So I'm just going to see if I can slide it over. I might not be able to because of the connection. No, it looks okay. Here, I'll just have it drag a little bit. Here's where its highest point is. I'm going to drag that key, control drag it over, and then have this one linger a little bit. Burp. I think that head I even want to go slower. Go up to the right head here and just drag this key over a bit. And now the next thing, the head, well, the ear is kind of doing some weird stuff, so we're going to slow that ear down. Alright, so the head is hitting and then stopping. So it's going up, boonk, and stopping, and then our follow through, our like eyebrows and hair and stuff are keeping on the go. So what I'm going to do is have this head overshoot the actual position it ends on. Just a little bit. And stop motion on our eyes. Boop. Alright, so it's starting to come together. His head is overshooting a little bit, and then it's going to go back down. So here I'm having it kind of linger, and then I'm going to want it to go down pretty quick. So we can see if that'll auto-tween, and we want it to linger a little bit, so I'm going to use this to slow out of this move and see how that feels. So it does need a little bit of guidance because you can see his head is sort of melting over to one side. So we can't just auto-tween there. I'll undo. What I'm gonna do instead is grab one of these halfway keys here to give it a little bit of guidance. So instead of rebuilding each piece, because I've got all these pieces I've built already, I'm just going back and grabbing things that are gonna make my life a little bit easier rather than rebuilding everything every time. So back here we already know we've got some nice eyes that are happening. And here it's tilting down a little bit too quickly, so I'm gonna grab the halfway between here and here. And I'm gonna make that the new key and drag it over here. So that's a really easy way to adjust timing on these auto tweens. Is you just, if you want it to go slower, you grab the halfway between the two keys and make that a new key and then drag it over. So that's going to make the speed half of what it was. Alright, so it's starting to feel like it's getting a little bit of life. I don't want to spend too much time on the head and then find out I hate my body, so I'm going to move on to the body and get that working. So let me grab my head, and I'm going to keyframe out all my odd numbers, starting from the back here, burp, 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 and ask myself, why is this here? You're not necessary. And then set them all to stop motion. Because when things are auto, like, things just look nicer on 2s. Let's see. All right. Alright, so I got this head working a little bit better. Now I got it on 2, so he's looking up. These arms I want to slow right down. So we're going to have the arms stay up until about here. Because he really wants that phone to hang out until later. I'm starting to look at his arms, and I feel like he's moving them too much for what he's doing. He's just looking up, but he's bringing his phone right down. And it might look okay as far as a key goes, but once I start tweening it, it is looking a little bit odd. So here he brings it up. And I don't think I want it to go too far below this, so I'm going to grab these and steal them. Alright, so not much happens between here and when I finish recording because it's starting to get a bit late. I just wanted to record an outro because this is going to have to get broken up into pieces. And I don't really say much after this point. I just kind of, I'm thinking about what I'm doing and being very quiet. I don't think the next direct video will be a continuation of this. I might throw something interesting in between here. I want to talk a little bit more about head rotation, maybe some other stuff. We'll see how it goes, but I'm going to continue this series of videos with this guy and this animation in particular. But I don't want to just have lots of footage where it's me animating and not saying anything. That doesn't seem like it would hold much interest to anybody. All right, so thanks for dropping by, and there'll be another video before the end of the week. I had a long weekend out of town, so I didn't get a chance to do anything this weekend, but I wanted to get this edited and posted somewhere so you guys could have something. As always, any questions or comments, leave it down below. Anything you want to see in particular. Like, share, subscribe, all those things internet people ask you to do, and I will see you in the next video.